We are live, and I'm going to let people start to pile in here on this President's Day,
Okay. All right.
where we're talking about congressional elections. But my name is Kate Powell. For anyone watching now, I'll be watching the recording later, and I am with the platform Kate for the People, and this is the Candidates of Our Dreams series. And what I always like to disclaim at the beginning of each of these episodes is two things. One is this is homework time, so we are not here just to entertain you, though I'm sure Tracy and I will be extremely entertaining once we get started. But we are also here to talk about ways that we can get involved with a candidate's campaign and how we can advance the candidates that we want to see. Because either we're going to continue to have the people who are funded by super PACs and dark money, or the people are going to start supporting candidates who will advance causes and legislation that we need/want. So that is my spiel about that. And the second one is that this is not a purity politics channel. If you've watched enough of my stuff, you know that I am not into all of that sort of thing. The principles that we are going to discuss are going to be varied, and they can be attacked usually from a lot of different angles. There's a few things that maybe are like, hard nose, like, we don't think that genocide is a good thing. But we also know that sometimes the way that we approach solutions to these problems has to be multifaceted. We have to do both. And there's not a whole lot of black and white in politics as much as people might like that. So please leave all of those things at the door and try to enjoy this conversation and then figure out how you can get involved. If you are in Pennsylvania 1, your incumbent is Brian Fitzpatrick, who is an interesting person in Congress, let's just say. How long has he been in the seat, Tracy, before I...
He's a 5-term congressman.
That's right. Yeah. So he's
I
been
think
there
he
for a
took
minute.
office in 2016. So he's
Right. He knows what he's doing as far as how to get the seat. And so if we're going to oust him, we need to be strategic. And he definitely needs to be ousted in spite of some of the PR he has given himself. Along those lines, Tracy, why don't you introduce yourself to the people?
Thanks, Kate. I'll be happy to. I'm glad to be here tonight. My name is Tracy Hunt. I am running for Pennsylvania, as Kate said, Pennsylvania's 1st congressional district. I am a 30-year resident of Bucks County. I'm originally from North Carolina, but I've lived here for 30 years with my family, and I'm a local attorney in Bucks County. I have been for over 27 years. I'm also a local university professor for over 20 years, and I'm a tenured full professor at Delaware Valley University, where I teach business law. And this is my first foray into politics, my first interest at all of sticking my throwing my hat into the ring. And I've been, like a lot of people, what I like to say is I'm a constituent, not a politician.
Mm.
And like a lot of your followers, I'm sure I am a frustrated citizen, and I'm just tired of the incompetence and the hypocrisy and the gaslighting. And like a lot of folks, I've been waiting for somebody to, step up and start doing the right thing. And it seems like we're going the opposite direction of that. So I decided, I have a skill set that I've represented a lot of townships and boards of supervisors. I've written ordinances and regulations and litigated statutes and interpreted them for these elected officials. And frankly, amongst the Democratic primary candidates, I have the most experience doing that. I'm the only one that's actually been a lawmaker, which is the job that we're running for. So
Yep.
I'm running on a pro-democracy, anti-authoritarian ticket. I want the return of checks and balances. I want Congress to take back its power that they have relinquished. And we need the 3 co-equal branches of government to start being co-equal.
That would be phenomenal.
If I could get any of that accomplished in the first term, I would consider that a major success.
No kidding. Considering how much damage there's been, not just with Trump too, but even in I would say the couple decades leading up to it, the lack of co-equalness is not new to 2025. Though
Right.
I think 2025 was um like when the Overton window really shifted on us having,
Yeah.
these 3 separation of powers type situations.
Yeah, I think 2025 is the hard break from democracy towards authoritarianism.
Right.
But I agree, this goes decades back, that Congress has been sitting back and letting the other branches pull powers away from them that constitutionally, belong to them.
Right, absolutely. So, Tracy, I want to ask you about, you obviously just alluded to it. You're fed up as are many of us, a frustrated citizen as am I. And I'd love to ask you about your journey into actually deciding to run because nobody just wakes up usually and decide. I mean, I know people have those moments, right? Like I
Yeah,
woke up and I just knew I had to run, but there's usually a lot of like, complicated things. And your story is an interesting one. You have like not only from like the decision to run, but who you're politically affiliated with, what Pennsylvania one looks like as far as, what people respond to from a
yeah.
candidate. I would love for you to take us on your journey to, like, how you got here in front of me today.
Sure. No, and I'd love to. So let me start with the district because I think that does play an important role here in
Mhm.
why I saw this as a viable path to start with. So Pennsylvania one, I mean, has a chance to really be, I think, a launching pad for sort of a new brand of Democrat. I'm calling myself a modern Democrat because I'm approaching this thing differently than the establishment does. But Pennsylvania one has about 440,000 voters voted in the 2024 election here, right? That Brian won for the fourth time.
Right.
And there's 10,000 more registered Republicans than there are Democrats in this district. So it's pretty close. That's a pretty close number.
The Cook toss-up type thing.
Exactly.
Right.
And there's 85,000 unaffiliated or independent voters. So in 2024, that was 20% of the electorate was independent.
Right.
So when I sat down and started thinking about is there a path to do this and which party and how would we get there, that was one of the things that I looked at. That 20% will decide this election. And as I've gone out and met with folks on the campaign trail, I say that. And when I go into these local Democratic committees, they don't like hearing that,
Mhm.
but I say it anyway.
Right.
They think that they control what's going to happen. They think it's a get out the vote situation. And
Mhm.
it is to an extent.
Right.
But those 85,000 people will decide this, and these are all independents. They're not drinking the Kool-Aid from either one of these parties anymore. So that was the big picture of what the district looked like. Obviously, Brian's a Republican. As you and I talked before we got on air, I have been a registered Republican. That seems to be a bit controversial amongst some of the local Dem committees. I'll just admit that.
Mhm.
And I've they want me to explain myself, and I've been happy to do that. But
Mhm.
I have never run for office as a Republican. I have never canvassed for a Republican. I've never been a committee person for the Republican Party. I've never voted for Trump. Right, I voted for Obama twice. I've voted a lot of Democrats probably over the last 10 years, quite frankly.
Right.
And quite frankly, I thought the Democratic Party was much more inclusive than it seems to be once I've thrown my hat in the ring.
Yes.
But go ahead.
No, go
So,
ahead. Keep going.
okay.
Yeah.
So as I sat down in early part of 2025, watching what was going on, I was really, as I said, frustrated. I wanted to do something about it. I said I grew up in North Carolina, and I'm an Army brat. My father was 82nd Airborne Command Sergeant Major at Fort Bragg, and he spent 30 years, as an enlisted man there. And
Right.
I grew up my entire life there. So I'm the least traveled Army brat I've ever come across. And so, you know, he was always had this motto, either do something about it or shut the hell up. So I decided I have the skill sets, I've got the experience. I certainly can't do worse than what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
And so I decided to, get into it. But that being said, I am a litigation attorney. And so I did some due diligence. I talked to a number of local Democratic involved folks that I know and trust, said, is there a path here for me? And they all encouraged me to do it. And part of it is because the person that the Democratic Party would like to have as their candidate is a 20-year Democratic politician here. He's an establishment guy. And one of the people that I spoke to said, this is what he's always wanted to do is be a congressman. And he said, and that's exactly the wrong reason to run for office.
Yes.
And he's like, you are the exact right reason. I've already had my career. I'm not looking for another step on the ladder. I've been an attorney and a university professor for over 20 years. I'm doing this because I'm frustrated, not because that's my next move in my career.
Right.
And so he then actually helped me get in touch with some of the folks from Mikey Sherrill's campaign.
Ah, okay.
And so we have some friends who were hosting a fundraiser for her in New Jersey because we live in New Hope in Bucks County, which is right across the river from New Jersey. So our friends were hosting a fundraiser, and we went and I met Mikey and I met our campaign crew, and some of their social media folks and their video folks got a hold of me, and that's who did my video that's on my website, and it's a very great video. I encourage people to go check it out. And it was really interesting to talk with them. These are career Democrat strategists, 25 years working for a lot of other big candidates. And they were saying that they would like to see it's refreshing to see a new voice and a new face. And they think that because of my background as a registered Republican, that there is a lane. And they
Yeah.
said, maybe not every year, but this year there's a lane there.
Right. That
And
makes a lot of sense considering, so Brian Fitzpatrick has been like the weirdest person to watch in Congress for a
Mhm.
lot of us, right? We've been like, what the hell is his deal? I think he's absolutely MAGA. I've not been confused even one time
Right.
about that. Do I think he's been very slick in how he has pretended to be the voice of reason a few
Mhm.
times?
Yeah.
Sure. But I don't buy this moderate Republican thing from him, because if you actually pay attention to the legislative process, you know that he votes in a very strategic way
Mhm.
to please the people who don't pay attention as much in his district. And I don't mean that in like a mean way to his voters. I mean, like, people don't have time to sit there and babysit like what is the rule versus the vote on the bill and like all this kind of thing. And
Right.
so he can be able to say things like, I voted no to HR1, or
Mhm.
whatever. And it's like, no, 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 you didn't. Like,
Right.
you did and you didn't.
Yep.
Um, you did things to make sure it would go through, and then you had this whole little thing where you ran from the floor and made,
Mhm.
like, a whole thing about it, and we all laughed and thought it was funny from the liberal, democratic, left-leaning independent side,
Right.
but we all knew what you were doing too,
Right.
like, no confused. And so with that being said, I think that, you know, the idea of a lane for you where you can say, like, "Look, this party no longer represents my values. So I've switched parties, first of all, but also, like, we need to be able to talk to the people here in our two counties. You said that this district
Mhm.
straddles two counties. We need to be
Mhm.
able to talk to the voters where they are. Because if we just come in and lambaste them with like, okay, we need like socialism and whatever, they're just gonna go running into the arms of the Republican,
Right.
candidate that they're gonna go running in the arms of Fitzpatrick because he is running again.
Sure.
Um and because he continues to, like, have this fairy tale of being
Mhm.
this very moderate, normal, bipartisan person.
Mhm.
And so I appreciate what you're saying about, wanting to take that lane, and that, yes, you have this narrow margin of independents/swing voters. They're not enough to carry an election, right? Like,
Right.
so, because there are different districts I've talked to that where an independent is running, but that's because their district is made up of independents, and they're able to
Right.
carve out the independents and then some of the moderates from both parties into a coalition.
Right.
Your counties don't sound like they have that at all. It's like like you've got a toss-up cook
Mhm.
district.
Yep.
Everyone's pretty polarized, and then you've got this sliver right here that you can talk to who, as you said, will decide the election, but
Yep.
you need to be in a party. It's
Yeah,
not.
exactly. You have to be in a
Right.
party. Right. They will decide the election. Those 85,000 or those independents are going to decide the election, but there are not enough. You couldn't run as an independent. First of all, Pennsylvania makes it almost impossible to do anyway.
Right.
But even if you could, there's not enough of them that you wouldn't be able to prevail. You wouldn't be able to peel off enough R's and D's to win it. But when you flip it the other way and you're coming from one of the R's and D's, those 85,000 definitely make the difference. And
Yeah.
and there, I mean, you cannot win without them. Let's
Right.
just put it that way.
Right. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
thank you. That I want people to understand that, like, I'm talking to candidates from all over this
Mhm.
great nation, in different districts, and the electoral situation is just different in each district. And if you try to shoehorn what's going on with your district or what you wish
Mhm.
was going on from New York City or whatever, and like place that on everybody else, w- we're gonna lose every single time, and then we end up losing the ability to shift towards progressivism
Right.
because we're too busy looking for, you know, whatever. I mean, like, I think Mikey Sherrill is a great example
Mhm.
of people were like beating her up for not being. I honestly don't know what they were looking for. I just
Right.
remember there was
Right.
like in the lead up to the election, it was a lot of like she's not enough of whatever, whatever, whatever.
Right.
And I'm in Virginia. They did the same thing to Spanberger. She's
Yep.
not enough of whatever, whatever, whatever. And I'm like, people, at the end of the day, like, we have independents and moderates in both parties who have to be spoken to, and we're gonna get into issues
Right.
in a second, which is
Yeah.
why I like to center these
Mm.
interviews on issues. But
Sure.
when we get to issues, most people are leaning towards the progressivism, the democracy, and
Yeah.
whatever.
Mhm.
if you teach them how they are able to afford it, even better, because that's usually where you lose the independence is they're
Right.
like, I don't, they've had so much like
Sure.
propaganda about how much things cost and how that works and
Right.
whatever. But you have to be like, you have to be willing to do that education. And if you just like
Yeah.
scoff at them and go like, why don't you just get this? It's okay. Well, great. We're
Right.
going to keep losing to Brian Fitzpatrick then. like
Well,
that.
and that's exactly right, and that's again, that's been a little bit of Brian's secret sauce in some ways. I will tell you, because we're here locally, I don't think he doesn't fall into the area of being MAGA. I don't think he believes that ideologically.
Mm,
However, he is a political animal, and he does
yes.
understand how he has to maneuver, and he knows that that's the flavor that he needs to curry
Right.
favor with, and so he makes sure that he does. And your point about the bill, I mean, that's one of the big talking points that I get into with these local Democratic committees when I go in there, because the other Democratic candidates are, they're like, well, we all know that when that bill, when he voted no on that health care bill, and we're talking about HR1, the health care
Right.
bill last summer,
Yeah.
and that when he voted no, he was one of two Republicans who voted no, but the bill passed anyway, and they
Mhm.
got all the things that they wanted. Um, but as I'm sure, know, Kate, earlier in that vote, the vote from the House that took it up to the Senate, he was actually the tie breaking vote.
Right.
It went up by one vote, and it was his vote that actually broke the tie.
Right.
And so when it came down, he didn't have to vote, in
Right.
favor of it, because they were going to have enough votes. But what I've been telling people is that's not enough. That's enough for the Democratic electorate. They know what's going on. But those 85,000 independents, you really need to point that out to them and shine the light on it. And so what I've been telling people is, hey, you know what he didn't do? Let me talk to you about the things that he could have done, but he chose not to do
Right.
with that bill. Is he didn't go on a single cable news channel at all
Right.
to say this is a terrible bill for the American people. This is going to cut the ACA subsidies. This is going to impact a lot of people,
Right.
and this is a terrible bill for a lot of reasons. There's a lot of bad stuff in that thing. And he didn't do that at once. He didn't do a single cable interview about that.
Right.
He's also the co-chair of the Problem Solvers Caucus,
Right.
which is supposed to be a group of moderates.
Right.
And he's been on it for 5 terms. You can't find 2 other Republicans to join with you on this bill that you think is so terrible that
Mhm.
you went against Donald Trump and voted no?
Mhm.
Courageous, but you couldn't get 2 other people to join you on the Problem Solvers Caucus? So, I think you have to call out these things. Just like this last one, I'll just add this real quick, the discharge bill. He got all kinds of now he went on a lot of national TV with this discharge, because he signed the discharge petition where he joined with him and the 3 other Republicans, I think, joined with the Democrats for the ACA subsidies to
Right.
finally, extend them. But what nobody's talking about is that literally, I think 5 days later, Mike Johnson put up a health bill as well, and Brian voted for that as well. He
Right.
voted in favor of that bill, and that bill does not extend the ACA subsidies.
Right.
So
Yes.
that to me, that's him. That's an encapsulation of exactly what Brian Fitzpatrick is.
Right.
On December 10th, he voted in the discharge petition. He looked like, hey, he's the moderate. He's willing to buck the system. Look how brave this Republican is to go against Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And 6 days later, he joins Mike Johnson's bill that does not extend those ACA subsidies. And he's one of I think it passed like 216 to 210 or something, but
Right.
he was one of the votes that passed it.
Yeah.
And that's who he is, and that's who he's always been.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you highlighting all of that. And again, I think it highlights even more that Pennsylvania one is not going to be won by the like, well, you just need to understand the liberal talking points and like move on, right? Like
Sure.
these people vote for him on a regular basis for a reason. So
Mhm.
you have to be able to call out the hypocrisy, like you
Yeah.
said, and you have to be able to show like when we get down to issues, this is not the guy for you. So speaking of issues,
Sure.
Tracy, this is
Yeah.
the part of the interview where we go
Mhm.
through the 9 points of the candidates of our dreams. And you already talked earlier about, switching parties
Mhm.
and kind of your journey through this. And so I do want to know like where you land on these 9 points and
Sure.
we'll go one by one, okay?
Do it. Let's go.
So first, takes $0 in corporate campaign
Mhm.
money.
Yep. I will tell you that is here's my little lit piece that I carry. A lot of people, it is on my lit piece. Yeah. It says, "Can get big money out of politics. He will not take one penny from corporate PACs." So, I mean, that's in print. So and I'm not
You're like,
inclined
"Okay, go back on it
to
now.
go back on it.
These
Let
were
me put it in
expensive."
for yeah. So, no, that's look, I think, and that can go down a long road of the problems with big money in politics.
Right.
I also feel this way about lobbying. I think honestly, lobbying is a really big part of this for me. I think the lobbying arm has gotten out of hand, and frankly, I think that's what's caused the political part, the national political party leadership. They're running the show. It should be the voters running the show and the voters telling the elected officials what to do, but it's not. It's the parties driving it, and I think the lobbying money and the corporate PAC money, they're all jumbled together. But yeah, I think that's a big part of our problems here.
Yeah, amazing. Number 2, term limits themselves and advances term limit legislation.
Yeah, look, I mean, I haven't made that a front burner issue necessarily in my campaign, but I support it, and I would absolutely advance term limits. Again, this is not a career move for me. This is
I'm fed up.
a frustrated constituent or fed up
Mhm.
constituent role for me. So I have no problem with that. I have not thought about what that legislation would be or how many terms we're talking about, but I would 100% get behind term limits for all members of Congress.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I usually ask candidates, like, have they thought about, like, what the number would be or
Yeah.
what they're thinking of.
Yeah.
I've usually heard somewhere around, like, 10-ish years, and which I think, I had one candidate who put it very beautifully of, like, being able to complete a body of work, right? Like,
Right.
you're frustrated, you're
Sure.
irritated, you're trying to advance
Right.
things. It's like, you're gonna need some time. Like, 2 terms is not enough, 3 terms is not enough for a
Right.
congressman. That's only 6 years, and
Yeah.
we can I mean, as much as it sometimes feels like we're never gonna get out of this current administration, it has already been, like, over a
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
So, in some ways, it's like time
It may
to
be the longest year ever, Kate.
it's seriously the longest year. Every day it's like, "This is the longest
Yeah.
10 years." Like, the longest decade of my life was 2025.
Yeah, there you
Um,
go. Exactly.
I feel better now that we're in 2026.
Yeah.
Okay, number 3, reasserts their power over the Supreme Court, and you're an attorney, so I am very interested to know your thoughts on this.
Um, Look, I mean, as attorneys, you do learn about all these Supreme Court decisions, and you don't have to always agree with Supreme Court decisions. I mean, that's the beauty of the judicial system that we have here and have had for hundreds of years. But that being said, this Supreme Court is a whole different animal,
Right,
and I have never been more disappointed. And so that's my point in what I said to start with is, you know, even with decisions, in the 60s or 70s or 80s, you know, you didn't have to agree with them, but you respected the decision. You felt that it was well reasoned. You never felt like it was political, and maybe it was. Maybe we were naive, and maybe there was more politics than we knew that was going on, but it was not overt like what we're seeing now. This is
right,
just gratuitous, and
right,
it's really ugly, and it's embarrassing. I am, I've never said that I'm ashamed of a Supreme Court, but I am. This is shameful what this Supreme Court has done, and how they're handling stuff. So I know that your bullet point piece here is the exceptions clause, and I couldn't agree more. I mean, this goes back to my other sticking point, or my other foundation of my campaign, which is Congress needs to take back powers that it gave up. And this is one of them. And it's crazy that they have not even remotely tried to reel some of this stuff in.
right,
And part of what I propose when I'm talking to folks there is about these issues is I'm very pragmatic. What can get 218 votes? Right?
right,
You know, because I believe in a lot of stuff. There's a lot of socialist sort of programs that I'm like, I could get on board with this, but I don't think it's possible to do. If I can't get 218 votes, it doesn't matter how grand this idea is. You have to get it through Congress, and the first step is to get it out of the House, right? So I look at stuff like that, and I think that should be addressing a lot of our problems by reminding the Supreme Court of who actually writes the laws. They're only supposed to be interpreting them. They're not supposed to be writing them. And, I
yes,
teach Title IX. As a professor, I teach Title IX. And the Supreme Court got the very first Title IX case wrong. Grove City College, they did a terrible job with Title IX and did not understand what it was. And guess what? It went back to Congress. They rewrote the Title IX statute and sent it
mhm,
back. And after that point, the Supreme Court knew what the ruling was supposed to be, and they stayed on track.
right.
Congress needs to do more of that and remind the Supreme Court that they're only supposed to interpret the law. They're not supposed to be writing it.
Right. Thank you so much for saying all of that.
So needless to say, I'm fully on board with the acceptance.
You're like, "I'm on board with this." Yes, yes, yes. No, but I mean, when it comes to I don't often get to nerd out about jurisdiction stripping in particular.
Mm,
One of the reasons that I wrote my list the way I did was thinking, "Okay, January 2027, what can we start fixing right away?"
right.
And, like, I know people want term limits for the Supreme Court, and I'm all for it, and people want,
Mhm.
packing the court. I'm also for that. Do I think that that's something you're going to be able to get through the House and then, of course, over to the Senate, which even if we flip it to Democrats, it's going to be by like the smallest of
Sure. Yeah.
margins still over there. Do I think that we'd be able to do anything other than some jurisdiction stripping in the next 2 years to try to
Right.
fix some of this? No. I don't think there's anything. I
No.
don't think you're going to be able to pass a Judiciary Act before
Right.
Trump is out of office. I don't think you're going to be able.
Right.
So, again, all things that I
Mhm.
want those things, but I'm also, when I'm talking about the candidates of our dreams for midterms of
Mhm.
2026 to
Yeah.
sit in Congress in 2027, start fixing things.
Yeah.
These are so, like you said, the pragmatism. These are some of the pragmatic things that I'm like, I want you on day one to go in there and be like, oh, you thought you had jurisdiction over Roe
Yeah.
v. Wade? No, you
Yeah.
do not.
Right.
No, you do not. So that Dobbs decision, oh, I
Yeah.
guess just doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
And by the way,
Right.
people, retroactive jurisdiction stripping is a thing. It's
Yeah.
historically been done. Um,
Or you can take, and another way to attack that is to attack the analysis they use for Dobbs, right? You
right,
say, you know what, your application of this legal analysis was not correct. This is
right,
what we intend by that. You
right,
maybe it wasn't clear, but we're going to rewrite this so that it's
right,
clear for you, and
right,
send it back.
right.
So there's a lot of ways to try to crack that nut, I think.
Yeah. I love it. Okay, number 4 and 5, and I do these together
Mhm.
because they're technically part and parcel.
Okay.
So, number 4 is raises wages and reinstates corporate tax marginalization. I
Mhm.
put those together for a reason, as
All right.
we can talk about in a second. And then
Yeah.
number 5 is increases tax marginalization for high net worth individuals. And everyone dissects this into tax the rich. And I love to say tax the rich.
Yeah.
In Pennsylvania, one, you might not want to say tax the rich. So, what would you say, Tracy?
Well, exactly. So, just to put some reference around this, so Bucks County is a very diverse county from Lower Bucks, which is borders Philadelphia, and it's more
Mm,
blue collar and
right.
unions and stuff like that. Central Bucks, which is considered more affluent in areas like that, and then Upper Bucks, which is actually a little bit agricultural. There's farms, working farms, and things like that. So it's a very and PA-01 is all of Bucks County, and then it's a sliver of Montgomery County, which give you a point of reference, Madeline Dean is the congresswoman from Montgomery County, but there's a little sliver of Montco that is part of this district.
Right.
So, but that being said, yeah, it's there is a lot of wealth here. Bradley Cooper and Gigi Haddad's house are about 5 miles from here,
Mhm.
so they live in the district, and so there is a lot of wealth here, in central parts of Bucks. That being said, I've said this from the start. First of all, the federal minimum wage is disgraceful, and we should just start with as a really low hanging fruit. The federal minimum wage should be raised. It will, in Pennsylvania, shockingly, Pennsylvania actually, the state minimum wage is the federal minimum wage. So, although Governor
Ours
Shute,
too in Virginia.
is it really? Yeah, it's
Same.
it's.
Mhm.
Meanwhile, every state around Pennsylvania,
Right.
it's above that. New Jersey's at 15 or whatever it is. Delaware's at around 15 or 12. It's again, it's shameful. So,
Well, okay, I take that back. We just raised it, but, like, for the longest time,
yeah,
Virginia was just at parity with
yeah,
the federal, and then it was, like, at the end of Northam, right before
okay.
Youngkin, we just started
Okay.
raising minimum wage, and we're only just now starting to get to the top of it. But anyway, yes,
Yeah.
go on.
So
I know
so so
exactly
but
what you
no,
mean.
no, so Pennsylvania, so I am absolutely,
Yeah.
and just to put a little bit more into that too is, I'm part of United Way Bucks County. I'm on their board, and
Mhm,
and
mhm,
and what I learned since I've been on this board is, and it's shocking to me because again, this most people in this area, they call it the collar counties around Philadelphia County. So it's Philadelphia County, and then the four counties that surround it, and Bucks is one of them. But Bucks is considered affluent. Everybody thinks it is, and there is some very high net worth individuals that live here. That being said, United Way of Bucks County has an acronym they call ALICE.
yes.
Oh, are you familiar with ALICE? Okay,
Mhm,
so asset limited income constrained employed, right?
yeah.
And 25% of the residents of Bucks County are Alice.
Mhm,
So these are what a lot of people know just as working poor. These are folks, some of them have two jobs and they still can't quite make it to the end of the month. So they come to our help center down in Bristol, which is in the lower part of the county, and they get free food and they get new items and things like that. And, they get treated like, human beings. And so, for me to find that 25% of this county qualifies as Alice was just shocking to me. So that ties into and we had a lady come in who got a $1 raise at a supermarket delicatessen. She worked at the deli at a supermarket. She was going to get promoted and get a $1 an hour raise, but she was on the federal poverty program. So when she came into United Way, they work with her to make sure that she doesn't fall out of line. Well, they calculated in her new $1 an hour, and it actually was going to decrease her federal funds, that she was actually going to lose money by getting this promotion and getting a $1 raise.
Yeah.
Had she gotten two raises, which isn't practical, and had gotten a $2 raise, she would have been fine and she would have actually been on her way out of being on federal financial assistance.
Right.
But she didn't get, you don't get a double raise and $2, you get a one raise. And so she actually had to go back and turn down the raise.
Yeah.
And that's why, and people are like, oh, they just stay in the system and they don't want to get out of the system, and the system is stacked against them. So
Right.
the long version of your answer, you absolutely support the idea of increasing wages. Um, my idea with corporate tax rolls into taxes in general as well, which is, I think, Besant not that long ago was gleaming because we had the international corporate rate that Secretary Yellen had finally got it put into place to kind of take away some of these tax shelters that corporations had used, like in the Caymans and things like that.
Mhm.
And they had changed it to a universal 15% corporate tax rate over 150 countries.
Mhm.
Yellen got that put in, and Besant a couple weeks ago was crowing because he carved out an exception for a bunch of U.S. corporations so that they now can avoid that 15% corporate.
Uh-huh.
So I could probably go further with that, but at a minimum, it would be to reinstate that international corporate tax rate of 15% and apply it to everybody. If you've got a corporation in America or out, and you can't go find the Caymans or some other place to go park your tax returns, so that you avoid that 15% tax return or tax.
Right.
I think corporations have to pay their share. That rolls into your next one, which is, I agree. I'm not a just penalize the wealthy. I don't think that's not an approach I'm ready to go with in terms of penalizing the wealthy or giving them this crazy, what I would view as a penalty tax. But I do believe in revisiting the tax system that we have.
Right.
And we may need to put a higher end tax bracket up there for the folks that are up there. I wouldn't want to view that as a penalty to them, but we've got a lot of significant wealth in this country, and it's probably time to revisit where the bracket ends, right? And maybe need to extend that out a little further. And because it's gross what the politicians are doing, because I believe in that tax bill, the big bill, right? Um, the one of the proposals that the Democratic senators made was to leave it at 39 and a half instead of lowering it to 37, which is what happened. And the Republicans wouldn't even agree to that.
Right.
And that's just disgusting,
Right.
right? So again, I don't think we want to penalize them, because I think then you're gonna have people fleeing the country or trying to leave this country with the take money out of the country. And I do believe investment back into the country can be a good thing.
Right.
But everybody needs to pay their share. The loopholes and the tax advantages that the wealthy are able to exploit, these need to be closed down. Again, this is a congressional thing that can be done. That the
Right.
Congress has the power to do this, and you
Right.
should close these type of loopholes. Everybody should be paying their way. We shouldn't have corporations who are paying no tax. We shouldn't have wealthy Americans who are somehow paying the 18% tax rate, and but they made $400 million.
Right.
Uh, you know, we I use this old saying with clients. Sometimes it's like, you don't have to be a pig at the trough, right? I believe in capitalism. I believe people should have a chance to start a company and be super successful, but pay your fair share and don't
Right.
take it this trough. You don't have to take everything out of that trough. You could
Right.
leave a little bit behind
Right.
and still be very, very well off.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and
I
so that's
I
where I come from.
thank you. And I'm definitely I can be a little guillotine-y when it comes to tax rates for the rich. I mean, if anyone watches me enough, I do. However, like the I think I do want to sometimes I wish we could shift the conversation sometimes because I
Mm,
think that the perspective of saying, yeah, high net worth individuals should be up at 50%. And by high net
mm.
worth, I mean like billionaires
Yeah,
should be
sure,
at
yeah, yeah, yeah,
50%. Like sound like people are like, that sounds crazy. And I'm like,
right.
is it though? And also, I wish we could do a lot more education around what marginalization means because
Mhm,
I think people get really confused really fast
mm,
about that. And it's like,
sure,
if I'm asking for Elizabeth Warren, I remember during the big beautiful bill, she stood on the Senate floor and she was talking about marginalization,
yeah,
and she was like, "Can we agree that if you make $1 billion, that everything after that should be taxed 50%?"
yeah,
And nobody on social media could
right,
understand. He did
yeah,
not mean,
right,
I am taxing the
yeah,
entirety of your
right.
wealth at
No,
50%.
exactly, yeah, and you're right, most people don't have any idea about
Right.
that, you know, they
Yeah.
just hear the little piece they hear, right, and
Right. Well, and unfortunately what happens is that the uber rich will take that misunderstanding and then they will run with it as
huh,
propaganda to the general electorate.
yeah,
And so they end up, they as in the general electorate who
mhm,
is not like trying to figure out what all of this means is like, "Oh, this is going to result in job flight or whatever." It's
mhm,
like, because we're dealing with it in Virginia right now. I just put up a
mhm,
bunch of content about how, like, literally all we're trying to do is put in some marginalization for
mhm,
less than 1% of the population.
yeah,
And you would think that we had hauled them
right,
out into the French Revolution
right, well,
from the
exactly, right,
reaction.
yeah,
And I'm like, it's 2%, first of
sure,
all, and it's marginalized
yeah,
above
right,
the
right.
threshold. Like,
Well, and I think, honestly, I mean, from a practical standpoint, that has to be incorporated in at the federal level because if you don't, then they're just gonna be forum shopping, you know, for other
ex-
places to go.
thank you for saying that. I do totally agree that when you're talking about state versus federal, you have this kind of weird push-pull where it's like the reason we're having to do it here in Virginia is because all these federal dollars are no longer going to be coming in
Yeah,
because of all the cuts that were just made. If
yeah,
they had just done it at the federal level, they
right,
wouldn't be. And forum shopping, if you guys are
yeah,
unfamiliar, this is a lawyerly
yeah,
term of running to the judge that will give you what you want.
yeah,
But same thing with taxes. You can like forum shop for the type of
yeah.
taxation that you want with different states. And
Well, the
which is why we
corporations
need,
do it when they're deciding where to put the next plant,
right,
right?
exactly. Yeah,
How many can I have a 20-year tax abatement and no unions, you know?
right. Yes, exactly. So it's like if we're doing better federal policy, then
Mm,
first of all, states wouldn't be in a position where they feel like they have to
right,
do more extraction because it's happening already and then being block granted down, which was the whole point of having a federalized system in the
right,
first place. So anyway,
absolutely.
okay, next one. This is always a contentious one, actually, because some people are very like either or on this, and I love to know where a candidate is. Bans stock buybacks.
Right. Uh, I I believe the Congress should not be involved in stocks, in stock trading, stock buybacks,
Mhm.
any of it. I think anything that look, I think that there should be full disclosure of any lobbyist money you get if you propose a bill.
Mhm.
So I mean, I'm about transparency on that. So and I don't think it's not just about announcing it and letting people know. I don't think for
Right.
stocks that Congress and should not be doing that. There should not be buybacks. I think to your point is with particularly with federal money, all right, when you're talking about federal money, right?
Right, like corporations buying
Yeah,
back their own stock
right.
and
Buying back their
getting
own stock,
like,
and
mhm.
I don't know the answer to whether Tesla did or not, but maybe because I know that they got 400 some $1 million of federal money, right?
Yeah,
Basically,
Tesla, they definitely did some kind of buyback in 2025. The big one last year was, Nvidia. Nvidia did like a half trillion dollar
yeah, yeah,
buyback or
yeah.
something.
So yeah,
Or not half
so yeah,
trillion,
no,
sorry, that's a lot,
look,
but
right. I mean, the federal dollars going into corporations to start with is an interesting,
right.
angle. And if Trump wasn't a grifter and a complete con artist, the idea that if we're using federal dollars, whether we would have ownership in it or not, wouldn't seem so dirty, probably, if it wasn't coming from Donald Trump. But it is an interesting dynamic when the federal dollars are being used to help corporations,
Mhm.
get started. And look, I think by a lot of accounts, Tesla wouldn't exist without the money they got. I'm not sure if Nvidia would, probably not either. But Tesla definitely would not have without that 400 million or whatever it was. So yeah, I mean, if you use that money, there should not be buybacks.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, or
So I'm
layoffs.
easy on
That's
that, or trading. I don't believe Congress folks should be trading stocks or anything where they have any kind of even remote inside knowledge about it. It's unseemly. Even if it's above board, it doesn't look like it's above board.
no.
It's too ripe for a very opaque situation. So
Right. Yeah, no, thank you for saying that. It's funny, I didn't put, congressional stock trade banning in this list
mm,
explicitly, but it comes up every time we talk about the stock buyback
mm, mm,
because one of the reasons that Congress doesn't wanna curtail the stock buyback is because it makes them a lot of money
mm,
when,
well, yeah,
when they're the holders and then they are able to do an insider trade or whatever, and
right,
especially if they know a company is getting ready to do a buyback or something, which means if they own the stock, their
mm,
earnings per share will go
yeah,
up. So, like, it's part and parcel of the same issue
right,
of, you have to, I'm a big fan of Joe Morelli, out of New York. He's
yeah,
got his actual stock trading ban, unlike the Republican counterpart that I always forget his name because I always say it wrong. But but
right,
he pretended to do a stock trading ban and it
yeah,
wasn't really one.
uh,
Anyway, but yeah, so thank you for
mhm,
your, discourse on that because some people, um, either well, it's just stock buybacks are another one of those things where it can sound like we're just dragging out everyone out to the guillotine in the village square, and it's like,
right,
well, it used to be illegal before Reagan,
yeah,
actually. So
well, yeah,
it's like it's market manipulation.
well,
But
exactly, yeah,
I will settle for, if people don't wanna get rid of it entirely, but they want to at least make it so it's like you can't do layoffs and you can't be getting a
mhm,
federal grant at the same time. I think
right,
that's a very reasonable
yeah, yeah.
ask.
Right.
My tax
Look, I think
dollars.
there's common ground that can be found, right?
Right,
Again,
exactly.
it's about being pragmatic and sensible solutions that 80% of us would be like, yeah, that's an okay. I can get on board with that policy, right?
Right, exactly. And then when we figure out the sky hasn't fallen, then maybe we do more. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like
Well,
sometimes
exactly.
it's also about teaching the electorate, like,
Hmm.
look, inflation didn't go up because wages went up.
Right.
We're okay. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
let's just chill and do the thing. All right, number 7. This is the most important one to me.
Mhm.
I say I'm not about purity politics, but this one it might be.
Okay.
Um, Invest in a robust, nimble, and strategic administrative state.
Yeah. So this is, I mean, and when I was reading this as well, which is an interesting because you've got a lot of different ideas coming together with this, right? Because
Mhm,
I agree, it does need to be nimble, and there should be strategy involved, but you do want it to be this robust thing. So look, I believe in I guess this is where maybe from I don't know, a Republican standpoint or not, but it's I think that uh, our our role as Congress is one where we should be able to facilitate that in a lot of way. I mean, I think it's become very interesting with Trump and how he's used his power to
mhm,
essentially. And look, as a congressman, I would be willing to press this issue with the Supreme Court a little bit more in terms of and I know they've been challenging some of these, and we're still waiting for some decisions on it. But I do think that the Congress should be filing lawsuits on every one of these things where he says that he has complete and total control over those administrative agencies. But look, I think that I don't know that anybody would disagree that there was probably some administrative bloat, right? But I saw something where I think the natural attrition rate is like 150,000 federal employees a year,
mhm.
and if you just did that, I mean, you would start
Right.
slimming down this administrative bloat that we have without the just cruelty and I mean there's a lot more going to that because I mean they've gone after unions, federalized workers that were unionized and canceling the collective bargaining agreements and things like that. And again, the courts have stepped in, and in most times, the federal court, at least, and hasn't got to the Supreme Court yet, but the district courts are upholding, what we all understand is normal, policy and the role that the executive does or does not have.
Right.
So I support that. I think that you know look, we have a massive debt problem in this country, right? We have a
Mhm.
massive deficit, and I don't think I think you have to have some amount of austerity to try to to get some of this under control. So, um, but that being said, I do believe we need these agencies, and I think there are agencies that have been lost from the administrative side, and
Right.
I think there's institutional memory that is just changing the White House is not going to fix it. There's going to be some long term damage here that's been done, and I believe that's for me. I'm taking that as your robust part, but I believe there are some very important roles that we our federal government does provide for us that we absolutely need to have.
Right.
From my campaign perspective, the two things I talk about that I how I see federal government is one is kind of a safety net that
Mhm.
you know we shouldn't we're a very prosperous and wealthy nation. We shouldn't have people that fall all the way to the bottom. The federal government should be some level of safety net there to prevent that, right? And I know we're going to get into healthcare probably at some point,
Mhm.
but healthcare is an example. You should not go bankrupt because you got a cancer diagnosis, right? That's to me where our federal government plays that role. There's certain social net, right, that we're not gonna let you fall through as a federal government. The other piece for me is that the federal government should regulate the abuses of what goes on, right? We have a lot of corporate abuse going on. They play a role as the rule maker, in Congress, and I don't think they do enough job regulating that. And I think they need to spend more time making sure that the statutes that we have on the books are either updated or current or effective.
Mhm.
And I think they need to be the monitor of things. I personally think that cable and internet should be viewed as a utility and should be regulated as a utility, right? It's not a luxury anymore, right?
Thank you.
And so I think Congress needs to go back and revisit stuff like that.
Right.
And so for me, that it's this combination that if I took a 30,000 foot view of what I think the federal government's role should be, to me, those are the two biggest parts of it, and that includes for me that number seven for you, the robust, nimble, and strategic administrative state.
Amazing. Yeah, I keep hearing a theme in even from the intro of this interview and through all of these issues is that you're like, "Congress, do your freaking job."
Yeah, sure. Well,
You know, like,
yeah,
please.
yeah, yeah,
Can I get a Congress? What are those? Like
yeah.
that is and I think that's the heart cry of a lot of voters, especially ones who
Mhm.
maybe are moderates and independents, or they're just moderate in both parties or
Right.
whatever, and they're like, "I sent you there to do something. Could you please just
Just
freaking
do
do
your
it?"
job.
Like,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know, this president should not be running buck wild. We shouldn't
right.
be shutting down agencies that keep our food clean.
Yeah,
Our military should not be in the Caribbean
right,
doing this,
right.
like, what are we talking about? This is your job. And, I'm in a big military area in Virginia, and
Yeah,
the USS Iwo Jima is stationed
yeah.
here, and
Okay.
we just lost a man overboard in the Caribbean.
Yeah.
And what were we doing in the Caribbean?
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
listen, and I brought this up we had a town hall, and this came up, and there's some folks here that are run for office, and they've done some time in service. But I was like, I was born into this. I mean, I literally was born at Fayetteville, North Carolina. My father had already been in the army for 10 years when I was born, and he was in for 30. So my entire first 20+ years were basically at Fort Bragg, and I remember, as a kid, you'd see. When you saw C-5As, if you would see planes and helicopters all the time, but if you saw six or seven C-5As coming in a line, you knew the 82nd was getting ready to go somewhere, right? And my father was sent multiple places. He 2 tours in Vietnam, multiple deployments. He was at South Korea multiple times for the DMZ, and we stayed home. We stayed back at Fort Bragg. And when I watched these little expeditions that Trump is doing here, and it's like it's a play. He's you watching it like it's a
it's a video game.
Good Night Miss Saigon or something like it's a game or a video or a movie to him, and these are real lives, right? These are real people's children and fathers and wives and sisters and stuff, and that's the part that bothers me. I mean, look, thankfully that mission from a personnel standpoint, they all came back. It seems like they all of our soldiers came back, and which was great. But that could have been a disaster, and one of these is going to be a disaster. They're going to lose. Well, you did to your point, the Iwo Jima, they already lost somebody
Right.
because they're dicking around out in the Caribbean doing whatever they're doing out there, and there's going to be something else where it's going to be a more tragic thing, or some helicopter plane, someone's going to get shot down because they're terrorizing some third world
Well, and it
country
was
that
a
they want to
disaster.
bully.
Yeah, and it was a disaster for the Venezuelans. They
Well,
hundreds of
absolutely,
people,
yeah, yeah. That
it's really just like what are and I talk about this under the administrative state idea because defense is part of the admin, and
mhm,
and w our armed forces are supposed to be a precious resource to your point of
Mhm.
what you were just talking about. These are
Right.
human beings,
Yeah.
and he is treating them like they're just nothing, like it's
Right.
just something to
Well,
play with.
I don't think the foreign policy, from my perspective, foreign policy doesn't have an end game to it. It only has the initial piece to it,
Yeah.
and it's there's not a lot of strategic thinking. It doesn't appear to be
Yep.
going on. Right there's the hey, I wish I could do this, and then they don't
Right.
think about anything after that, right? And the ramifications, what it's doing to the country that you've just done this to. I mean, we've basically taken Venezuela hostage, I guess, as a country, and I don't know what the end game is, but it's not going to work out well for us,
Yeah.
or for them, right?
Right.
And so there doesn't seem to be a lot of strategy involved in that, and again, it's just they because they're the biggest bully on the block, they just think they can do whatever they want. And look, it's something about being a superpower, but I think that comes with a lot of responsibility, right? And
Right.
they talk about what is it they keep saying? Strength through power through
Peace through
strength,
strength.
or peace through strength, or whatever. And I don't think that's it at all. I think it's more about leadership, and I don't think it's leadership through strength. I think it's strength through leadership, right? And I think that's what made us historically the superpower, not just because we had the biggest and baddest army or military. It was the other things that we did, the soft powers that we had, and all of that combined is what makes you a superpower. These clowns simply think it's because we've got the biggest and best military, which we do, but you're using them like a bully on the corner, and you're beating up the little kids, and it's it's unseemly, and it's not what we should be doing, and it's dangerous for our people and the people of the countries we're rolling into.
Right. Amazing. Number 8, advances universal healthcare and education.
Yeah. All right. So this is where my pragmatism, I think, comes in, because
Mhm.
we talk a lot about this. Um, Look, just to be clear, I absolutely believe everybody in this country is entitled to equal access to healthcare, and we should have it. I don't believe, like I said, I don't believe people should be going bankrupt because of their medical expenses and things of that nature. Uh, I I have some, and we can go back and forth in this a little bit. For me, I look at three things, right? One is, you got to pay for it. And there are ways to pay for it, but we have to decide what priorities are we going to shift to do it. And if we decide as a country we want to shift these priorities, then sign me up. I'm on board with it. But there's not just a pot of money waiting here to be used, right? It's going to come from somewhere, and we have to figure out where. So that's my one problem. My second problem is I've known enough medical professionals over my years now. A number of them are going to flee the profession, right? And they're already having a hard time because if they're going to be viewed as a state employee of some kind, or a governmental employee, um, and for some of them, the amount of debt. I mean, it's not an easy solution. If you're going to do that with the medical profession, you better figure out how they're going to get past the 400, $500,000 worth of medical school debt they have,
Right.
because a lot of them choose those jobs. I mean, honestly, I came out of law school, part of me was like, I'd love to be a district attorney. I kind of think I would be good at that. I'm like, how much does that pay? I'm like, I got loans. I can't afford to do this, and the same thing. And the medical profession is astronomically higher than that, and some of the debt that they're walking away with,
Right.
not to mention how long it's taken them, right? So, I just, again, it's a very practical type of problem, and if we could solve that problem and still have quality healthcare, because we have amazing healthcare here, and if we could continue to have that and have the R&D, the reason that comes along with our medical professions, um, again, if we can make that happen, I would be on board with that. So those are some of the issues that I have with it. And the other piece that I have, and it's a group in my campaign that we talk about this issue a little bit more than we do the others probably, is this idea that why are we trying to do it with the whole swath of Americans? Maybe we start 0 to 5, right? Maybe we give that, there you could get your universal pre-K built into that, right? Maybe
Mhm.
with a 0 to 5 range, or let's go the other way. Let's go 70 and above, right?
Right.
And give that universal health care. I'm not quite sure why we're trying to go 0 to the end of life, and that's a lot of, that's a big bite of the apple that we don't know we can do. Where
Yeah.
I would rather see us, let's start this and see how we can make this work, and then you can roll it out, across the population. So,
Right.
I believe everybody should have healthcare, and it shouldn't, cost them, rent and utilities and groceries and bankruptcy to get it.
Right.
Uh, but I'm not sure that I'm ready to sign on because I haven't seen a plan in place that gets me everything and seems practical and doable. I'm a big sensible solution guy, and
Right.
I don't see I haven't seen that yet. And that may not doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just that's where I'm at with that. Uh,
Right.
on the education side, look, I am my wife and I joke about this. My wife's an attorney as well. Um, she grew up here in Bucks County. I grew up in North Carolina. I'm a full product of 100% public schools all the way through. North Carolina has routinely, I mean, they are not, the last time I haven't looked at it recently, but when I was in high school, they were probably in the 40s in the country in terms of ranked public school systems,
Mhm.
not known for its, academic rigor. Um, and she went to all private schools, and we joke about it a little bit now because we ended up in the same place. Right? And she's like, "Oh my god, I did all of this, and it was private school, private, all the way through, and I did all public schools, and we both ended up at the same law school and graduated. We both attorneys." And she's like, "We literally ended up in the same place." So,
Right.
but I believe we need to invest in public education. I don't look if we have a lot of people that have wealth and affluence and they can afford the private schools, then send your kid to private school.
Have go
More
for
power to you. I don't believe in the voucher system for that. Pay for it. If you want to go, pay for it. But we shouldn't be pulling money that could go to the public schools. Public schools is again, it's part of that safety net. And quite frankly, I've been since I got more focused on getting into this campaign and doing this the last 18 months or so, I've been focused on civics, right? I never thought I cared about civics since like high school. And let me
Uh-huh.
tell you, we need to reinstitute civics in
We
middle
sure
school
do.
and high schools because as a university professor, I can tell you, poof, it is not pretty out there. And folks just don't understand, how our government works and what our government's supposed to be doing and how it's supposed to be working for us. And there's so much misinformation because they get so much information from other sources or additional sources. And
Yeah.
so I believe public education should be fully funded and supported. And I believe we need to become a little more vigorous with our stuff like civics and sciences and math, because I think that's going to be what our future leaders are going to need to have.
Amazing. I would you let me lobby you a little bit in less
Sure.
time?
Yeah. No.
Okay.
Please do. No.
So I actually think the reason that I put healthcare and education together is because one of your key sticking points, which is a sticking point,
Mhm.
is, if we're going to have universal healthcare, how are we going to have the professionals in it? Like we have some, right? But we don't have enough. We already know
Right.
that. Like we have because, at one point they capped medical school
Yeah.
enrollments and now here we are. And then also like nurses are fleeing the profession. We're already having profession flight right now.
Yep.
So part of when I picture universal education and there are models for universal higher education,
Hmm.
specifically for public service fields, medicine, that sort of thing.
Hmm.
And medicine teaching, whatever, things like that.
Sure.
And I think that those have to be part and parcel of the same conversation because of what you were just talking
Right.
about. It doesn't matter if we have, quote unquote, universal health care if there aren't enough people to administer the health care.
Exactly.
So that right there, I think,
Yeah.
is like part of the solution. But I also agree, Medicare for all I know is the popular one, happens to be the one that I ascribe to. It
Hmm.
costs $4 trillion a year,
Right.
which is like the current budget of the
Yeah.
entirety of our
Right.
government
Right.
on a yearly basis. And do I think that the money can be there based on the fact that it's not like, oh, we're just adding 4 trillion because we end up saving there's savings
Right.
everywhere and that's too complicated of a conversation to have right here.
Right.
But what I appreciate about your
Right.
approach to this is that you're like, please show me the numbers. What is it that we're going to
Right.
deprioritize versus prioritize? And we
Yeah,
can
as a
do that.
policy, yeah, I'm not opposed to it as a policy
Right.
or as an ideology. I would look. I think that would be ideal.
Right. Yes.
Who? Why wouldn't you want to be able to do that, right?
Right. But
But to
even
your
like
point, yeah,
but
but we got to be able to. We got to make it work.
Right. Well, and even countries like Denmark who have
Right.
universal health care,
Hmm.
they are currently going through a stress test with it right now
Yeah.
because they, like they have some real problems with keeping it solvent. They have been able to deal with it
Right.
and whatever. They've also had to be very draconian about immigration. So then we have to, you know what I mean? Like
Oh yeah.
there are gives and takes. And please understand, people, I am all about like humane immigration policy,
Yeah.
but and I do think because of how interventionist we've been on the foreign policy side, we owe the world
Oh,
some
yeah, yeah, yeah. We've
humanity.
got some making up to do for
Right.
sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right. Exactly. Like we have debts to pay.
yeah,
But we still, at the end of the day, if the money's not there, it's not there. And I appreciate that you're like, please, for the love of God, someone give me a plan and then show me in sticks
right.
and bricks how we're going to build this house. And I do, as an independent, get so frustrated with people who talk about universal health care and they don't want to talk about the bottom line of it. And I do appreciate that you're coming at it from those things. But I will say that
Mhm.
I think that the healthcare and education piece can solve each other if they're done correctly as a
No,
policy.
and look, I don't disagree with that idea.
Yeah.
I agree that they're linked together, and
Right.
if you could solve them collectively, you probably have a better chance of making that universal health care happen, right? And
Right.
just to put out there, my oldest daughter, I have 2 daughters, graduated last August, and she's a physician's assistant. So she's
Mhm.
currently, working in a neonatology, uh, floor at a hospital. But yeah, so she's in the medical profession, and she loves it, and she wouldn't trade it for anything else. But she recognizes that too. I mean, she's got a lot of offers. She's at a fellowship right now. She's got a lot of offers, and because they're shorted, they're
Right.
very short of it, and making them a quote unquote government employee, is not going to bring more people into the profession. So you're
Right.
going to have to figure out, and that's why I agree the education piece is critical to that.
Right. Well, yeah, and then also like back to the point about having a strategic administrative state. The way we've been treating our government employees lately, I wouldn't want to become one right now.
Yeah.
So like there's other things we have. What you're saying is there's other things we have to fix either at the same time or
Right.
before we get there, because
Exactly.
otherwise
Right.
you're
And
fighting.
to your point about Denmark, I mean, and because we actually had a Denmark exchange student when our daughters were in high school, and we learned a lot. And we actually went back to
Oh,
Denmark, visited her like a year later. And but it's a much smaller population, which goes
right.
back to my idea that if we want to stick our toe into the world of universal healthcare, why don't we chop off like a group of 0 to 5 year olds or 70 and up, and get a group of that? Because I mean, we are obviously much larger population wise than Denmark, and Denmark has their problems, and Canada has their problems. They're kind of have this creeping second tier, 2-tier system now because they're getting a lot of
Yeah.
private doctors, which again goes back to the problem. You're going to have doctors who work for the universal system who can go make more money in private practice, and it's going to dilute, and it's going to basically do what Trump is doing to the ACA, right? It's going to hollow
Right.
it out. And if these universal programs get hollowed out, they collapse on themselves because they built off of volume, and
Right.
so there's a lot of pieces to that, putting that
Yeah.
house.
Thank you. And
Yeah,
that right there is just at it. We need people in Congress who are willing to red team these things.
yeah,
I'm using jargon. Sorry, people. If red team is someone who's willing to poke holes into the plan, not
mhm,
because they hate the plan, but because they're
right,
like, I want this plan to work.
yeah,
And if and
yeah,
because we don't want to spend 10 years building universal health care for it to
right,
die 10 years later, and
correct.
then what did we do?
Right.
So
And look, I think that I never go into anything thinking that I have all the answers to, right? And I think that's what's wrong with a lot of our leaders, right? They think they do, and I learn a lot of stuff I learn stuff from people all the time, and I take it in and I use it, and I take it with my skill set and my experience, and it makes me a better person, I think. And so, I mean, even the group Citizens Impeachment that I'm part of now,
mhm,
when we first started talking, I was like, I need you to tell me why what I'm going to do if I get into Congress and sign those articles of impeachment isn't just performative when I know the Senate is not going to convict. And we had about a 20-minute back and forth with the two organizers. And I was like, okay, you're right. You're right. I'm on board. Sign me
yeah.
up. Because I was definitely on board with all the anti authoritarian, anti oligarchy. That was a no brainer. I was like, you had me once I saw that. But I wanted to get their take on why that's not performative. And they did a great job. And I was like, yeah, I feel better for that. So I signed on.
Well, and the fact that you just let me lobby you is also a sign. I've done this with a couple of candidates
Yeah.
where, and
Yeah.
it's not. I don't mean this as like a stress test necessarily,
Nah.
the but to your point, when I'm talking to all too often, if I'm talking to a politician, I'm getting their talking points and their
Mhm.
pre-scripted press things, and I'm like,
Sure.
I want to have a conversation about the issue.
Right.
And I want to know that you're actually hearing. And even if you disagree, I want to know that you're considering maybe that there's something there to take from it. Right. And
Yes.
it goes both ways. Right. Like, I
Yeah.
hadn't really thought of the of the talent drain that you were just talking about
Mm.
as like a top of mind issue. But now
Mm.
that you're saying it, I'm like, which is why we also need universal education at the same time in
Yeah,
order to
yeah,
make sure that we have
exactly.
this, right?
Mm.
Like that makes sense to me. But like if we're not saying it like that, then what will happen is that the authoritarians will take that as a talking point and they will run right to the voters with it, and then we will end up nowhere. So like, yeah,
Yeah.
no. Okay, number 9, and we touched on it a little bit, but I definitely
Yeah.
want you to expound as you see
Mm.
fit. Commits to multilateral, non-interventionist foreign policy.
So again, that's a kind of a broad area because I mean, because you could argue, with NATO, I mean, that's interventionist in some ways if we have to go to the defense of one of our
Right.
fellow NATO countries, right? So,
Mhm.
um, look, maybe we can look at Venezuela as an example, right? So, um, you know, was
Okay.
Maduro a bad guy? Absolutely. Is there a lot of corruption there? 100%. Could there, it's unfortunate a lot of our, I guess, oil companies, whatever happened with them and historically has not worked out. But to think that we can just unilaterally, in that case, go in there and do that, I think is, as I said before, is terrible foreign policy. Look, I do believe we have, well, we have had historically. I'm gonna have to put an asterisk by most of this at this point, but we have historically had a broad and strong allyship with certain countries, and I think what comes with that is a commitment to each other. I mean, again, I'm an army brat. My father spent parts. He would go for a year. So when I was in sixth grade, he went for a year. When I was in 11th grade, he went for a year to the DMZ in South Korea. Right?
Mhm.
And we have a very large military presence in South Korea because of the concerns with North Korea, for obvious. And as a result of that, we provide protection for them, but we also get intelligence information that is helpful for us to keep us safe back here because the guy in North Korea is a madman and would love to cause problems. So, foreign policy, I think, so if you say, well, us having troops in these countries is interventionist, I don't know if I agree. I think we have to have troops in some of these allied countries. I think that is
I
helpful.
agree.
I
Yeah,
think protects us here in the
right.
homeland as well as offers protection to them. Should we decide we want to go, into places like Greenland or any of this other nonsense that's going on? No, I don't think we should be doing that. I think that our foreign policy should be um, soft soft policy first, right? Soft powers. Um, I think we can do as much with international aid to help countries as foreign policy than anything with our military. In fact, probably more. You know, uh, not to get too deep into the Middle East and stuff like that, but I think. Look, Israel was our ally. We supported them. I don't agree with the extent at which we probably did, and the fact that we didn't condemn what they continued to do and should have stopped doing.
Mhm.
But I think we are a partner in that partnership, and I believe we owe a duty to help rebuild Gaza. And I think as a foreign policy position, I would be supportive of doing stuff like that. So um, so I don't know, I think your view is to not be involved in that,
No,
or
not
okay,
necessarily.
okay,
Well, because that's why I say multilateral
mm,
and non-interventionist.
right,
If there is, like with our allies, if
mm,
they're okay with us having a base there and we have,
right,
troops of the
mm,
great.
right.
The point is that everyone agreed. That's
Well, yeah, no, I agree.
you
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
the difference between Venezuela and Greenland, who are like, please no, and
yeah.
Greenland has our
Greenland's
bases.
ridiculous. That is absurd. That
Right.
is
Well,
the
and
stupidest
that's
shit I've ever heard, and I
right.
can't believe it has even gotten this much airstream. It's it's unbelievable that it's still being talked about.
Right.
That it's insane. They are a
Right.
sovereign country. They are part of Denmark.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
it's it's insane.
Well, and
And
Greenland, I
I
think, is
so I told her to that regard, I 100% agree with you.
right.
That is not what our role is. We're not supposed to be the bully on the block. The beauty of being the most powerful country is that you don't have to be the bully,
Right.
right? You can actually be the hero and be the good person. Everybody knows what you're capable of if you get pushed. You don't have to show it,
Right.
which is what shows so much of the weakness of this Trump administration and the leadership in it is because they don't understand that. You know, when you have that kind of power and respect and kind of you've been a leader in the world market, you don't have to show that all the time, right?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the people running the show right now don't seem to understand that.
Yeah. I think, obviously the US's history and foreign policy is complicated,
Mhm.
to say
Yeah,
the least,
100%. I
um,
agree.
across the entirety of
Oh, no, yeah, yeah.
our lifespan.
We've
But
done a lot of
you're
bad
I
stuff, for sure.
right, but I think at our most when we're thinking of when we're electing the candidates of our dreams, we're talking about what do we wanna be, right? We're trying to look at the future and be like, "Who do we
Correct.
wanna be? And what are we capable of?" And I could not agree more that it's like, yeah, we're already the wealthiest, we have the biggest things and whatever, whatever.
Mm.
We can actually just be the good guy.
Right,
Like, we don't have to be like
right,
this. It is literally unnecessary for us to be this way, and in our best moments, we haven't been, right? In our
right,
best moments, when we're interacting with countries in a
right.
multilateral way, we're we're better.
Yeah,
Like we don't have to act like this. And instead we just, you know, but then we have a weak man in the administration who's like got to show everybody like how big his stuff is or
yeah,
whatever. And it's like, and that's all this is. Like no
yeah,
one's
yeah.
going to convince me that it's anything other than that.
No,
It's like this is
right.
totally showmanship because that's all that he's about. Krista, I've
Right.
kept you forever, and I do want to get to the other parts of our interview. But thank you so much for like you really have done such a great job of being like super transparent. I felt like I had like an actual conversation with you about the issues, and not like here's my bullets, take it or leave it type thing, which
Yeah.
I so appreciate.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
What do you want to do for Pennsylvania one? If they elect you, what is it that you want to bring back to your district?
Look, I mean, I still stay with the kind of the overarching theme, which is, in order to I want to win this seat because one, I want to change this seat from a Republican to a Democratic seat, and this is going to be one of the crucial seats. There's no question about it.
Right.
And I think since the top piece of my lit piece is pro democracy, so the overarching thing, even for my district needs this too, right? Which is
Right.
pro democracy. We need to the Democratic Party needs to get there needs to be a divided house. Let's put it that way, because I have an issue
Mm.
with the establishment Democratic Party, and I don't believe that they're the answer to everything. But there needs to be a Democratic House, a Democratic, political party house, because we have to break the trio that they have right now with having the executive and both branches, both houses of the Congress. So I want a pro democracy. Um, Platform to be able to survive. And the only way you can do that is to have control of the house. Once you get into that, I think, I want to touch on things that are policy driven, the things that are important back here in the district, which again, affordability is a big deal here.
Mhm.
There is the central part of Bucks that is affluent and but there are a lot of people here that are hurting. The fact that 25% of the folks in this county are Alice qualified, uh, says a lot to me, and it says it should say a lot to all the leaders in Bucks County that that we need to do better at improving that. Um, and I want most importantly is for a lot of the people here to have faith in their elected officials, right? I mean, what is the approval rating in Congress, like 28% or something like that?
It's something bad. I don't know.
It's a
Maybe
horribly
Gallup
low.
will stop
Yeah,
measuring that too.
it's a horribly low percentage, and a big part of my platform is this, you know, we the people, right? It's is what we start with, right? Is we the people, and I take responsibility for this, and I think a lot of us should. We've created this bad government that we have. We've created this bad political system on both sides, both the Republicans and Democratic sides, um, and and I'm seeing that when I'm doing this campaigning, right? I'm seeing this in some of these local Democratic committees. It's so us versus them.
Yeah.
And honestly, if I could just dial down the us versus them that happens, because it started politically, but particularly over the last 10 years, I think it's in our everyday lives, right? People are meaner to one another. People feel emboldened to say racist and misogynistic stuff to people and just say it out loud. And I'm not saying they should say it quietly either, but they've been so emboldened to just do whatever they want to do. No matter how mean it was and how um, inhumane it might be to somebody else. So I think that if we had more responsible leadership and we the people took back our government a little bit, because they're supposed to be answering to us, and instead I've got political parties saying this should be the candidate. The Democratic committee here wants the 20-year establishment Democrat to win this seat. And they are doing everything to keep me and the other 5 Democrat candidates that are running to put us on the sideline. And I think that that's a disservice to the people of this district, because they're going to get a same politician, same career type politician. He's just going to have a D after his name instead of an R. And that doesn't improve their lives. And that doesn't make things better. They don't get more stuff accomplished. What they'll do is make a bunch of promises, and then if they don't deliver on them, they'll say, "Well, I put in the vote." All right, they'll do what Brian says. I voted against it. What was I going to do? It passed anyway. And I don't want to go there and do that. I want to bring back real results that I changed I changed the statutes and regs that control ICE, or I did this with regards to the tax code, or something that will impact them back here. Maybe not directly, but it will affect their lives. And I think right now, at least in this kind of purplish district, people would like to just not have the chaos, and they'd like to know that they have a transparent elected official who actually is looking out for their interest.
Yeah.
So that's what I would like to bring back if I get the chance to do that.
Sounds dreamy, Pennsylvania. Okay, Tracy, let's end with how people can support you. Where can they find you on social, your website, volunteerism, donations? Don't be shy about
Yeah,
this.
I need all of it. I need all of it.
And also your election dates, like the primary situation, if
Yeah.
there's
All right.
anything
So
weird about that, because like some places do caucuses and whatever. I never know what's going on. So please
okay.
explain all the ins and
All
outs
right.
of Pennsylvania one.
Yeah, I'll give you the quick and dirty on this. The primary is May 19th. So we're
Okay.
several months away from our primary. The primary is May 19th. There will be a Democratic primary because there's a total, I think, of 7 candidates right now.
Okay.
It does not appear there's going to be a Republican. There has historically been one Republican that would try to run against Brian, but he doesn't look like he's going to do it this year. So Brian will go unopposed. But there will be 7 of us in the Democratic primary, which will take place on May 19th. Now, the interesting thing here in Pennsylvania is that we all have to get petitions, and we have to get 1,000 signatures on those petitions for Congress, and we have 3 weeks to do it. So starting tomorrow, actually, February 17th until March 10th, they have to be in Harrisburg on March 10th. So we have 3 exact weeks to get 1,000 signatures. Now, the local political parties, you would think, would be helpful in that regard, and the answer is they can be, but both the Montgomery County, which is the little sliver of our district, the Montgomery County Democrats, and the Bucks County Democratic Committee, which is all of Bucks, are both going to hold their endorsement meetings this week. So we can't start signing petitions until tomorrow. And then on Wednesday, Montco is going to have their endorsement meeting, and on Saturday, Bucks is going to have their endorsement meeting.
Mhm.
If they endorse the establishment politician, which is all indications suggest they are, if those committees endorse them, the local committees are prohibited by bylaw from helping any other candidate get any signatures. So the thumb is definitely on the scale here for
Mhm.
the establishment to keep sending the same person that they want to send. The party bosses get to choose. I
Right.
will tell you that the chair of the Bucks County Democrats just had an issue with the state senator because he did not even want a primary. He tried to talk the 3 candidates into a straw poll, and whoever won the straw poll was going to be the primary candidate. The other 2 would drop out. And he literally put that, it's in the newspaper out here, and I mean, he does not even want there to be a primary. He thinks it's a waste of energy and time. So I need as much support as we can get. Pennsylvania should endorse open primaries, but they don't. We are a closed
Right.
primary state. But my website is tracyhuntforcongress.com,
Mhm.
all spelled out. My Instagram, which I will say I do a lot more because I have a 26-year-old and a 24-year-old daughter. So I do more stuff on social media than I do on my website.
Mhm.
But on Instagram, my Instagram is at Tracy P. Hunt. And my Facebook is Hunt for the number 4 Congress.
Yeah.
And I do videos pretty regularly on topics that I just did. I apologize in advance for the 4.5 minute long video, but I could not shorten it. It was about the SAVE Act.
Right.
Because just as a side note, Brian Fitzpatrick, not shockingly, voted in favor of the SAVE Act.
He sure did.
And I spent I will say that this is what is frustrating as well because the Republicans have gotten very good with this, right? They do this kind of crazy stuff like the SAVE Act, and you have to unwind it and explain why this is not about voter eligibility,
Right.
right? This is not about, well, because nobody thinks that showing your ID is outrageous, right? So
No.
that part sounds reasonable, and they're very good at giving you just a little kernel of reasonableness wrapped up in a whole bunch of crazy.
Right.
And so it took me 4.5 minutes to unwind this and
Mhm.
explain to people how bad this really is and what they're really trying to do with it, and it's not about integrity.
Right.
So anyway, on the two socials, that is where I put these types of videos. I don't really put them on the website. But absolutely, if you go to the tracyhuntforcongress.com website, there is a donate page connected to Act Blue. So we have an Act Blue account. Um, that would be fantastic. All help is needed. Just if nothing else, so we can print some more of lit
What
pieces.
is
And like I said, I will be spending the next 3 weeks canvassing for signatures, which takes a lot of manpower and man hours up there. And then we will have a hard run, to the primary because, like I said, it's a very good chance the establishment politician is going to get the endorsement. So we're going to have to really get the messaging out. So people that can like and follow and share our social media pages, that would be helpful as well. The more amplification we can get, the better.
amazing. Tracy, thank you so much for the conversation today. I know I kept you for a while,
No,
but
no, no.
I really did appreciate how expansive you were on everything and how transparent you were about your race and your journey and where you come from. And I definitely think Pennsylvania one would be well served by you. So
Thank you. I
good
appreciate
luck with the
it.
primary situation because that's a
Mhm.
lot. And we will definitely be following your race. And when you win your primary, we'll just put that
Mhm.
into the water.
Thank you.
We will have you back ahead
Yeah,
of the general election. So,
that would be great. Yeah, I know you had Anna Lila Mejia on recently. Yeah, and she's part of the citizens impeachment group that we are
yeah,
part
she
of as
is.
well. And she's actually she's Mikey Sherrill's old
Yep.
district. Right?
Yep,
So
yep.
well,
I'm working with her team to get her back ahead
good.
of well, because her special general will be May or so, no,
No,
April.
April, end
Yeah,
of
so she's
April.
coming up. So I'm
Yeah,
trying to get her in
yeah.
next month so we can
And
be
then
like,
she'd
all
have to run
right.
again in November.
Yeah, I know. It's
That is
crazy.
crazy.
It's just insane. Like, I'm like, this is, but she's a machine. Like, she's
Yeah, yeah.
a force of nature. So, all right. Awesome. Everyone have a great evening. I
Mhm.
will send out the write up with the links and everything like I always do after these, so that you can go support Tracy. And we just need to get Fitzpatrick out of there. Okay. Like,
I
whatever we
agree.
need to do,
Exactly. Yes.
whatever we need to do, that needs to
Well,
be
I
done.
appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me, Kate, and I
Of
appreciate
course.
everybody for listening. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
absolutely. Have a great night,
Bye-bye.
everyone.